Just let me know when you hit record. Okay.
Right, recording. So, hello everyone. My name is Brando, and this is
Oh,
um,
hi everyone. I'm Sophia.
yes. And today we're going to be just presenting about how to ace the science courses at UCR. And before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that you could turn on your cameras. You know, it's nice to show face, but just make sure that you're actually muted until the end of the presentation, so you could ask questions at the end. We just wanted to, put it out there, let you guys know so it could run as smoothly as possible. But yes, welcome to the first workshop of the quarter and the year. We're really excited to have you all. And before we get started, just a show of hands or a little react at the bottom. Does anyone know of some good tips to be a successful CNAS student at UCR? You could either comment or chat in the chat box. It could be anything from academic related to lifestyle related to anything.
I can give out one. Let's say maybe
Yeah,
keeping a planner or utilizing like Google Calendar or something is a good way to help
mm-hmm.
with studying.
Yeah. And I see one student or one individual said that not to procrastinate. So that's also a really good tip.
That's great.
And
Yeah.
we will be diving into that just right now. So, a little overview of what we will be talking about today is some general study habits and some habits you could form going into UCR to help you be the most efficient studier and student here. What to do before, during, and after lecture. Honestly, this is my favorite part of the presentation because we're going to provide you all some tools and advice to, attend class in the most efficient way possible. After that, we're going to be explaining some preparation tools for exams because I know those are really important, and a lot of first years feel like they're scrambling or they don't know what to do. So we will cover that in that slide. And lastly, after we talk about exam preparation as a whole, we'll go into specifics about how to prepare for exams in Chem 1 and the Chem 1 series, Biology 20 and 5A, and also Math 9 series. So yeah, let's get to it.
All right. So we'll be going over some general studying habits. So it's always best to have a good foundation for studying and to be aware of certain habits to take on. So of course, um, first, we should all be attending class regularly. We're all students first, and tuition can be expensive. So, this is the bare minimum to get your money's worth. Next is practicing active listening. It's a very important transferable skill. I believe that you should carry on past college. It's useful in a job setting, etc. And you can do so by simply engaging in your learning, asking questions, and acting on your curiosities and questions. And by doing so, you can be proactive with your learning by utilizing your resources. And that could be whether attending office hours with your professor or TA, or even going to the academic resource, also known as the ARC Center for Open SI and tutoring sessions. And lastly, it's always good to get in the habit of studying before and after lectures, like Brando mentioned, which is something we'll be going more in depth later towards during the workshop to reinforce that information that you had just learned during class. And just a side note, I know this is all your first year of college, but just keep in mind that it's the best time to experiment with study habits and maybe time management skills and how those certain things could and could not work for you in terms of what you can carry on for the rest of your college career. All right. And again, this all applies and it falls back on the different methods of learning. So can I get a show of thumbs or at least a reaction for those who identify as visual learners? You can click the little reactions link at the bottom.
I
Okay,
see one. Nice.
Kenya, nice. Let's see, how about people who are audio learners? No, okay, it's all good. Um, Anyone who prefers reading or writing? Okay, Michael, nice. And lastly, kinesthetic or interactive learners. All right, there's the majority. Okay, cool. Thank you everyone for sharing. Personally, I identify as a visual learner and a kinesthetic slash interactive learner. I tend to draw a lot of diagrams and I find myself rewriting my notes and highlighting a lot of key topics to improve my learning. However, I definitely saw a few people give a thumbs up for more than one area of learning, and it's okay to identify with, again, one or multiple ways of learning. As you go through college, it can vary, and you may come across even professors that may solely lecture with no PowerPoint, or a professor that only utilizes Kahoots, you know. So again, as you go throughout college, you may have to adjust with the different learning styles of your professors.
All right, thanks, Sophia, for describing the different types of learning. Personally, I'm a like Sophia, visual and interactive learner. So I really like having my slides out, highlighting important material, in which we'll dive into that just in a bit. But now that you all know some general study habits that you should take in for class, we're going to teach you how to set up for your quarter, right? So what to do before your quarter even begins. So this is stuff you could take on to winter and spring of the following year, and even in the quarters in the future. So before the quarter starts, I like to have a set amount of goals that I want to accomplish. For example, like when I was a first year in winter, I really wanted to join a couple more student orgs. So I wrote that on my planner and I said, hey, I want to do X amount of orgs this quarter. So, having it and putting it in words right in front of you, and to have something tangible to hold on to that has your goals, is something that I think is super important. Afterwards, after you've done that, going to your classes, make sure to check your syllabi for each class, or your syllabi, and map out any dates for important midterms, exams, and you could even include stuff like SI sessions for your chemistry classes, for example, or your TA and professor office hours. So I really like to congregate all this information into one planner. Personally, I use iCalendar for my Apple devices because it's synchronous within each other for all my devices, and I like to have all my information, whether it's exam or office hour or midterm, to be in one place. So after you've utilized the planner to do so, it's also important to make sure you prepare your materials that the quarter requires, so your textbooks, your notebooks, your flashcards, etc. To that you're going to need for class, because you don't want to be scrambling for that stuff during the quarter, right? And lastly, this is really important, and we'll get into this also later in the presentation, is finding an effective way to study for yourself, right? So today we have just 8 people in the Zoom call, but that means 8 different ways that one could study. And we emphasize this a lot at UCR, that while there's certain ways of studying that works for different people, it may not work for you. So take stuff that you like from said person, something that works well for them, and shape it in a way that it fits your schedule, fits your style, and fits your personality. Okay, like I said in the beginning of this presentation, this is one of my favorite parts about this presentation, is teaching you all and informing you all on what to do before lecture. So, in a non-COVID setting, I would go to the library because we'd have these printers available for all students, in which you could print out your slides and your notes for the day. So that's what this WEPA diagram is on the slide, if anyone's wondering. But what I like to do is print out the slides that I'm going to have for the next lecture, right? So I have it in my backpack, in my notebook. And before I even step into the classroom, I have the slides reviewed, so I know what the professor is going to talk about. I have important terms highlighted, and I also have um, circles around anything confusing, right? So when I step into class and I'm listening to the professor, I don't have to write down everything that's on the slide because I have the slides in front of me. That saves a lot of time, by the way. And I also have a list of questions on the side of my slides on the paper. So when I step in a lecture, I know that I could ask these questions. So I don't have to be using time to think of anything that I'm confused about or whatsoever like that. In addition, I forgot to mention that, of course, the required readings are very important for class. So you don't want to be doing that during class because you want to be listening to the professor. So make sure you do those before class time even starts. And Sophia will talk to you a little bit about during lecture, what to do during lecture and after lecture.
All right, so thank you, Brando, for giving or for prefacing them with ways to prepare for their lectures. So again, I'll be going over things to do during lecture. So it's really important to be as present as possible. Like I mentioned beforehand, we want to exercise being an active listener, and that includes no distractions. So can I get a little reaction or maybe a show of hands for those that immediately grab their phones once they get a notification or as soon as it lights up? A little thumbs up from anyone. Okay. Well, I would assume that it would be a few of us and myself as well. So, but because I am aware of my tendencies, I'll typically put away my phone, um, hide in my backpack, or even put it on do not disturb for the time being. Um, so moving on, if you're lost if and your professor permits any questions during lecture, definitely do not hesitate to ask. I'm sure many people are sharing the same thoughts, but are too scared to ask. So, be that person who uh, will be able to answer everyone's questions. And alternatively, if you don't want to interrupt your professor, you can definitely refer to your peers or even TAs that sit in on the lectures. Sometimes that is their purpose, to be able to aid to the students during the lectures. And as Brando mentioned before as well, since you came prepared to lecture with an idea or notes beforehand, you're able to make room to listen more to what the professor has to say. Typically, it's more important and it will not be written down or even put in the lecture notes. So this is your time to catch those little pieces of information that may be put on the exam. So for example, if I hear my professor repeat a term multiple times, I'll definitely make note of it. I'll highlight it to remind myself when I'm studying for an exam to focus on it. All right. So for after lecture, again, it's important to reinforce the concepts that you had just learned. So definitely take the time, after your class or the night of to go over your notes, lecture slides, or posted the lecture recording. So you will be pinning down anything that still confuses you. And then once you get all those concepts down, you write down all of those topics. Then you would refer to your schedule, see if you have any free time to attend office hours or even attend any tutoring sessions at the ARC. So then personally, what I would do is if I have homework in the class, I'll do it and I'll recognize if I'm able to connect the concepts or if I'm able to answer certain questions with no trouble, just trying it out to see where you may be lost in the class. So if so, definitely refer to your peers. I know some of you are in learning communities. Again, the Academic Resource Center, even the TA, you can shoot them a little email. All of these resources are open and available for free to all UCR students. So lectures contain pretty dense information, so it'll be important to be able to understand and apply those concepts, and that's why I'm talking so heavily about all these resources that you can use. So personally, I like to create flashcards and rewrite my notes in a more condensed fashion. So it's beneficial in the long run for when you're actually studying for your exam. Um, it's easier to refer back to your notes. So essentially what I'm trying to say is try to take your best notes as you go through the course before your exams. So when exam time does come along, you won't be spending your time rewriting notes, and instead you'll be indulging all the information, even learning the last minute topics that your professors decide to add in.
Thanks for sharing that, Sophia. So one overarching question remains. How may I go about studying for your Chem 1 series, your big learning community classes for this first year? So luckily, we're going to have some very, very specific advice on each class that's pretty popular amongst LC folk and students. So we'll start off with the Chem 1 series, right? So Chem could be tricky sometimes because it's conceptual based while also some sort of math that's calculation based. So for a course that's heavy in workload, you're going to want to use as many resources that you are provided by the professor and by the class itself first. So that goes over, or that includes doing as many homework problems as you can that you previously have turned in. And from my experience in Chem 1 series 3 years ago, we had these homeworks online, and actually I was after completing it, I could go back in the weeks forward and go back and redo them without seeing my work. So that I kind of acted like a practice homework session slash practice quiz, if you could call it. So just going back and doing the things that you did will help reinforce the concept that you may have forgotten in the weeks prior. After you utilize the homework resources that your professors have given you, it's also really, really handy to use the practice exams. So before midterms or before finals, go through these practice exams without looking at your notes, right? Take it as is and pretend that it's an actual exam. And you can go through the key later to correct anything you have, and then maybe revisit those concepts that you commonly miss on these practice exams and refer to your notes, refer to your homework problems, right? So this is all developing skills and reinforcing concepts that you may have forgotten for the exam day. So after you've used those resources that the class has given you, you could even go further, right? So use flashcards for quick equations, for vocab. I tend to use flashcards because it's kind of a quicker way of knowing quick equations, simple terms, versus a study sheet where usually I print out an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and categorize it on the chapter or the concept. And these differ because study sheets are more centralized, large pieces of information, while study/flashcards could be used for quick memorization before bed or something like that. And like I said, for the study sheet, it's kind of big, the piece of paper versus like a 3x5 note card. So make sure that you're keeping organized with that piece of information, because sometimes you could get lost in it. And I know for a couple of my chem professors, actually, they let me bring the study sheet into the final or the midterm. So it can be very handy to do so in an organized manner. And even if the professor doesn't allow you to bring that study sheet in, it's still a great way to study and prepare for your exam.
All right, thank you, Brando, for that. So moving on, we'll be highlighting Biology 20, also known as the Dynamic Genome Lab. So some of you may be taking Biology 5LA or the Bio 5A lab, but this can be taken in place of that 5A lab. So just to go over it a little bit, it's a great course for those interested in research because it introduces you through intensive laboratory experience with modern laboratory techniques, such as manipulating DNA, PCR, bacterial transformations, etc. So you will also be having a midterm and a final research project. So in terms of studying for this course, we recommend utilizing YouTube. You'll come across multiple lab exercises and even new laboratory apparatuses that you may not know how to utilize. So if you want to remind yourself or even know beforehand how the experiment will play out, you can find demonstrations on channels like Thermo Fisher Scientific, Crash Course, Khan Academy Medicine, or even the Organic Chemistry Tutor. And that is a channel I personally have found helpful throughout my college career, because not only does he cover biology topics, it's also physics, chemistry, and like his name, organic chemistry. And next, Quizlet is amazing as well, as you can turn your terms into memorization games, keep track of the terms that you're having trouble with, and you can even add pictures or diagrams of maybe the apparatuses or the certain microbes that you may be looking at throughout the class, and you're also able to print out the flashcards. So again, with Biology 20, you will have a final research project, and it's a great intro into UCR research in general, because it will be based on a research project that is being done there with a certain faculty or TA. So also as a side note, if you are interested in research, definitely check out the UCR research portal to get a more in-depth list of what's offered at UCR. All right, so for the intro to Biology 5 series, so Brando and I were both in your guys' place taking these classes, so we found some helpful tips to kind of help tackle each part of the series. So as for study tips, we suggest to always do the reading. It's more detailed and more in depth than what your professor is able to cover in the class. So for 5A, you'll focus on a ton of macromolecules and biological processes. What worked for me was writing out a template for, let's say, maybe photosynthesis or the Krebs cycle, and leave them with blanks. And when I'm practicing for a test or a quiz or whatnot, I'll fill them out with labels for each step. Let's say it's maybe how much ATP is being made. And again, I'm able to identify which part of the cycle that I'm not getting and I'm not understanding. So for 5B, the focus is on the evolution of species. So with that, you'll have to know the phylogenetic tree and the trends associated with it, then be able to recognize certain species and maybe the phylums that they fall into. For myself, I remember distinctly I had a blank wall in my apartment, and so I actually, as the course went on, I built up my own kind of life-size phylogenetic tree, and it was really helpful in terms of studying for my midterms and my finals, just to have it right in front of me and practicing like, okay, this falls under this phylum, this falls under this family. So that's just a few tips for 5B, and for 5C, you'll be covering graphical trends in terms of evolution and ecology. I remember utilizing YouTube a lot for a deeper explanation into these certain graphical trends. I found it easy to understand some of the text as well by applying it to real life situations, since you'll go over things like maybe how humans have contributed to global warming and whatnot. And as for labs, in 5A, you'll be writing a research paper and getting familiar with the scientific method and how to apply it. So in addition, you will also be getting familiar with scholarly articles and finding reliable resources. I can definitely attest to the importance of this as a fourth year who has read multiple research articles already, and it's week 3 to help for my upper division courses. So definitely try to master it and get good at that. So for 5B, you will identify multiple species and fossils as you go throughout that course. And as you can see here are a list of a few websites to help with the identification, such as iNaturalist, Discover Life, etc. And for 5C lab, my biggest takeaway was to take notes of the TA's PowerPoints, as it becomes helpful when you're studying for the quizzes given in class and for the graphical analysis that you have to do when you get to your final field research project.
All right, Sophia, thanks for teaching us a little bit about the bio courses here as a LC student. So one of the last courses we're going to talk about is the Math 6, 7, and 9 series. So these are the math courses you're probably going to be taking as an LC student. So before I dive into preparing for the exam itself, I wanted to mention something super, super helpful when I was preparing my notes for class and just even attending class is, and what that is color coding your notes, right? So math has things ranging from equations to like different examples and theorems. And in a sea of all black text on a white piece of paper, it could kind of get pretty overwhelming or confusing where to navigate your notes, right? So make sure to have colored pens, or I have an Apple Pencil, so I could change the different types of color that I'm using. But use these colors to your advantage, right? Color code your equations in red because those are the ones that are going to stick out the most on your piece of paper, and the equations that you're probably going to need for exam day. And then use more humbler colors such as green and blue for theorems and examples on your notepad. This is a strategy I have because math, on top of the whole practice aspect of it, is very equation heavy. So you're going to want those equations to really pop out on your page, right? So after you've prepared your notes for class and you're sitting in front of your notes and you're like, hey, how do I study for this class or for this exam coming up? Here are a few things I really, really recommend. So know the difference between flashcards and equation sheets/study guides. I talked about this a little bit in the chemistry slide, but flashcards will be like your quick memorization of these formulas and equations that you're gonna need for exam day, while study guides could include like listed out examples on how to use those equations. While these equations may be popping out in red on your notepad, it's important to also know that equations are useless until you know how to use them, right? So make them nice and bold, practice how to use them on whiteboards or chalkboards if you're, old fashioned. Because, on test day, if you have the equation and you know how to use it, it's going to be way easier than struggling on what to use that equation for. Also, on top of practice techniques of these equations, you're going to also refer to all the quizzes that you've done because you most likely use those equations and formulas on those quizzes. So, just reiterate the concepts in your brain, how to go step by step through practice problems, and you should be great for test day. If you've done all these things and you still feel like you need to supplement your practice, make sure to check out some online resources such as Paul's online math notes and Professor Leonard for more tutorials similar to what Sophia was talking about of like the OrgoChem tutor or Quizlet or these YouTube channels. And overall, across all of the classes we talked about, if you feel like you need to supplement your instruction and your learning, make sure to check out these 4 on and off campus resources that we really, really recommend. And Sophia and I have used these in the past. So the Academic Resource Center, Sophia talked about this a little bit before, but they offer tutoring assistance programs as well as help on writing essays or for English or across any class, right? I've even used the tutoring assistance program for the Academic Resource Center for my neuroscience class, which is an operative, and that just shows and puts to light how specific this Academic Resource Center provides help for, right? In addition, Khan Academy I've used in the past too to help me out with my chemistry courses. Organic Chemistry Tutor and Crash Course are also similar to Khan Academy and provide you step-by-step tutorials on YouTube. And you could go back 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and rewatch it a million times if you still feel like you need to understand it. So yes, thank you for sitting through the presentation. I'll stop the recording now, Sophia, right?
Go ahead.
For questions? Okay, cool.